In this week's episode, we talk about why I am a immediately no when it comes to using hard tools like the psoas release or whatever it's called in the abdomen to release the hip flexor. It's super popular, great marketing team. Kudos to them. They really sold the shit out of that thing and every like type of thing that's similar. But it's not the best. And I just want people to make an informed decision about the choices they make. And if you still want to use a hard tool after listening to the risks, then go crazy. But yeah, this episode talks about those risks, talks about why I use soft tools and or very well-intended and precise and specific hands-on treatments, and how you can too, and why it's important. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for being here. Hey there, and welcome. I'm Anna Hartman, and this is Unreal Results, a podcast where I help you get better outcomes and gain the confidence that you can help anyone, even the most complex cases. Join me as I teach about the influence of the visceral organs and the nervous system on movement, pain, and injuries, all while shifting the paradigm of what whole body assessment and treatment really looks like. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello. Here we are, another episode of the Unreal Results podcast. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. I feel like it's funny because sometimes when I sit down to record, it feels like it's been way longer in between episodes, but it's been a week. So I don't know why I feel that way, other than just maybe the whole process is getting quicker. So it doesn't feel like I'm only doing podcasts, which I wouldn't be mad because I enjoy it, but it's also, that's how it's feeling. So I was a little bit like, I don't know what I want to talk about today. I originally was going to have one of my athletes join me, but that's going to have to wait till maybe next week because we did not have time to do it last week when we were together. So I'm back at home for a bit and had to figure out what to record. But then yesterday I got a question texted to me by my sister, who, bless her heart, family, am I right? When it comes to helping people in their bodies, helping your family has to be perhaps one of the hardest things to do because it just takes them a while to take your advice. And her back went out, and first of all, I didn't tell her anything. All I told her is, I feel for you. I have been there. It sucks. I'm sorry that you're hurting and can't move very fast right now. And I gave her like 2 little suggestions of like some cranial stuff and some like ankle things. Then she texted me that she went ahead and got on the bike and rode the bike a little bit, got her legs moving, which I was shocked because she would like any solution for things besides a form of exercise. So the fact that she did that without me even recommending it was pretty amazing. And I was very proud of her. And it did help a bit. But then the next day she texted me, which I think was yesterday. She texted me a link to one of those plastic or whatever tools to release your psoas, like the psoas release thing or whatever on Amazon. And she said, hey, do you think I should get this to use this? Would it help my back? Somebody told me that I should use it, but I trust your opinion more. And I like laughed out loud because first of all, I'm like, who are you? Because if you're now willing to do some sort of self-massage type of self-care, like we have turned over a new leaf and I love it. But also, absolutely not. Immediately no. Please do not. No, absolutely not. Do you not listen to me at all? Because I've like, again, but really, she does, but she doesn't. So I was like, no. And then she proceeded to tell me that I was like, who are you getting advice from? It's like, do you not have anyone that you could ask that actually does this for their job? You know, giving her crap. And then she was like, I wasn't asking for advice. I was talking to somebody at work about things, and he recommended it. He said whenever his back flares up, he sleeps on it. He literally sleeps on it 2 to 3 times a week to prevent his back pain. And I was like, wow, that is amazingly insane. And also, like, how do you sleep with a hard thing in your abdomen? I was like, I just can't. And so then I told her, I was like, yeah, no, you can do self-massage in that area, but it would be best if it was a soft ball or a soft thing or something gentle for your soft parts, because there is a risk of perforating and injuring your visceral organs when you're using hard tools, or even your hands or someone else's hands when they are used in a not a very intelligent way, specifically in a way that is like no pain, no gain, right? Which a lot of people think that's how self-massage should be. So, the risk is low, but it's still there. So I actually made a reel on Instagram today. I'll share it in the show notes about this too. I've done a reel on this in the past, but you know, once is never, and I probably did it like during COVID pandemonium time, and so that was like 3 years ago now, right? So and oftentimes I do get asked this by athletes and people, and it's just like, no, there are better ways to go about it. So, and specifically too, it depends on the person, right? Because she also has an inflammatory bowel disease. And that is like the person that I worry about in this scenario. And actually, to be honest, the majority of back pain and the majority of hip pain does have a visceral driver, does have a gut relationship to it. And so many people who are suffering from back pain and hip pain that get these tools probably do have some sort of underlying inflammatory bowel problem or gut issue that is already putting their tissues of their viscera in a not so ideal or optimal tissue health standpoint. So theoretically, one would think that if the tissue health of the visceral organs are not that great to begin with, pressing on them with a hard tool with a lot of force and pressure, eliciting pain often, is a really quick way to significantly increase the risk of perforating organs or causing massive hematomas that result often in the need for surgery, like abdominal surgery, to fix things. So, and I don't make this up. There are case reports in the literature. You can do a PubMed search and come up with it pretty easily. I shared 3 in the reel today. One was an older gentleman who was constipated and having pain and was vigorously and very hard self-massaging with his hands and lacerated his pancreas. You might, if you've been in one of my courses or seen some of my videos, I'm not sure if it's a public video or not, sorry, but I have a video of a visceral massage with a Coregeous ball, which I'll show you in a second, the ball. And even in that video, when I'm talking about the anatomy and the areas that we're at, I say, hey, this area is where your pancreas is at. And your pancreas is a very soft and delicate organ, and also a very important organ. The pancreas is an organ you don't want to fuck with, because if you were to lacerate it like this guy did, like when you start removing, injuring organs like the pancreas that are like linked to the function of everything, right? Because it is a endocrine and exocrine organ. Like, that's not ideal for optimal healthy living. That is just a risk I am not willing to take for the sake of self-massage, or even like working on someone. I am very gentle and very cognizant when I have my hands in the area of someone's pancreas. So that was one. There was also an article shared about transverse colon perforation, and then I can't remember if it was ascending or descending colon perforation too. So those are probably the more common ones, the colon things, because oftentimes people are going after the psoas. And the psoas, the area it is around is going to be sigmoid colon on the left, the small loops of the intestine, so the mesenteric root of the small intestine, and then on the right side, same thing, mesenteric root, can be ascending colon a little bit. Kidneys, the base of the kidneys are in this area too, so those would be ones that, gosh, those are the worst too. Like that, the kidneys are also very sensitive to high pressure. So the quickest way to feel like shit is to overtreat and compress on the kidneys. So these are some of the common things. You know, you also have like your abdominal aorta and vena cava there, your iliac vessels, like pressing on a vessel. Think about like some people, you know, some people's health of their vascular vessels are not great. And so then you're adding more pressure and pushing on it with a hard tool. I worry about some sort of like aneurysm type of scenario. Don't know if that's ever happened. There is potential for it. We have a lot of an important anatomy deep in our gut that is deep to fat, right? There's supposed to be fat to protect things, and it's deep to muscles, right? Posterior abdominal wall, anterior abdominal wall. Like, it's supposed to be fairly protected. Think about the organs that sit within the bowl of our pelvis. Like, they sit within a bony protection. And when we're sticking things in there, it's just, we're asking for trouble, especially if we're sticking things in there without having a idea of what the anatomy is like. So I will give, it's not like I don't give self massage of the viscera to people, or a quote, a psoas release. I call it that often because that's, the language. I'm speaking the athlete's language, but I don't necessarily think we're always working on the psoas, but it's the general area I'm trying to get. I give these to my clients. I give them very often, actually, but always with soft tools, and always when I am taking them through this journey of their insides, we're talking about the relevant anatomy. We're talking about what the anatomy is, what it could feel like what it should feel like. It shouldn't feel super uncomfortable. It shouldn't feel really visceral. It shouldn't be really painful, right? So if they're feeling these areas, feeling that way, I encourage them to move to a different part, or like change the prop, change the position, right? We're honoring what we're feeling, and we're not forcing things. So those are important things to know. And same thing too, the organs up underneath the rib cage. So there's when we think of the thoracic cage, right? The thorax, the ribs 1 through 12, and the spine and then the sternum, xiphoid process, manubrium, and the cartilages, right? The entire thorax. The entire thorax contains more than just the thoracic cavity organs. The thoracic cavity is the area above the diaphragm in the thorax. But then we have things below the diaphragm, still within the thorax, but technically part of the abdominal cavity. These organs are interesting and they're important, so they're still protected underneath the bone, but they do kind of get pushed down with the inhale breath, right? And become a little bit more exposed, right? This is actually how you can palpate the gallbladder to see if somebody's got gallbladder issues going on. This is like one of my athletes just recently asked me, because of the fight that was on TV last week or whatever, about like the anatomy of a liver punch and why that can be like such a big deal. The anatomy of a liver punch is usually a left hook applied to underneath the right rib cage. If it's timed right, when the other athlete is in an inhale phase, now the liver is even more exposed, right? And then this causes a big problem. Because why? The liver is a very important organ. It's why it's protected under the rib cage. So it's important to realize too that when we're using self-massage and these tools, when we're up in that area, that subdiaphragmatic area around the rib cage, like there's some pretty sensitive and important anatomy there to be aware of when you're doing some of these self-massage things. It doesn't mean that you can't do self-massage with your hands or with tools, but it means that the type of tool you use is important, and the knowledge of why you're doing it is important, and to understand the rules of harder is not better, should not be painful, let your breath guide you, like deeper is not better, etc. So, I do want to share the balls that I usually use. I'm going to share a little bit about the balls, some resources for you. I'll link all of it in the show notes. So where to get the balls, the resource I have, the resource I'm going to share. And then we'll talk a little bit about what visceral manipulation is, because I know I talk about it a lot on the podcast, but I don't think I've ever actually given like a full like explanation of what it is and what you're doing with both visceral manipulation, manual therapy to the muscles or fascia, and also with the self-massage. Like, are we really releasing a tight thing? Like what exactly are we doing? So first off, the tools. This is a Coregeous ball, deflated. When it's inflated, I guess I could inflate it. Has a little plug in it that you just pop right out, and it comes with a straw that you inflate it with. I keep mine in my desk drawer. Perfect. Gonna inflate it. Once it's inflated, as you pull the ball off the straw, you then plug the hole with your finger and then take the plug and quickly replace it. Now the ball is, this is probably like a 10-inch one, depending on like which run of the manufacturing you get. Sometimes they're a little smaller, sometimes they're this size, but anywhere between like 6 to 10 inches in diameter is a good size. The reason I love the Coregeous ball, besides loving the person and the company that created it, is it is superior to a lot of the balls that are similar to this in the industry, 100% because of the texture of the ball. And that texture of the ball, what I love about it is it is really great at grabbing the skin. And then you get a nice skin stretch and shearing along with the pressure changes that the ball induces. So the other great thing about this ball is it's really easy to inflate and deflate because oftentimes a ball that's completely inflated, it is a little firmer, and so the pressure is going to be a little bit greater. Plus the surface area is more fixed. Whereas when we can let a little air out of it, we decrease the pressure because it's not as firm, but then also the surface area changes and often gets wider, which also decreases the pressure. And as a reminder, in case you don't know how that works, it's a physics equation. We all probably learned in 10th grade physics, and then probably again in college physics if you took it, is pressure equals force divided by area. So the force is always going to be the same here on Earth. It's your mass times gravity. That's the force. And then the area is going to be the surface area of whatever tool you're using or body part you're using, right? This is why sometimes a thumb hurts more than an elbow, because my elbow has greater surface area than my thumb does. So even though, right, my thumb doesn't seem so mighty, it's mighty because it's still attached to me. So when I'm leaning on it, it still has my same force as my elbow would, but the surface area is smaller, so the pressure is greater. Okay, so the other tool I really love is a 4-inch soft, flexible, also inflatable, but not with a straw, with an actual like hand pump, or like whatever, it can be hand or whatever, it's the pin, right? Your traditional like ball pump. These ones are called smooth Franklin balls. Franklin is named for the person who owns the ball and made it. Eric Franklin, his company is called the Franklin Method. They have a bunch of different balls. I just love, again, I'm picky about the companies of the balls, the types of balls, because not all balls are created equal. And I like the softness of this, and I like the thickness of the material. And again, there's a little tackiness, so it grabs the skin a little bit. A different tackiness than the Gorgeous ball, but also there is a tackiness to it. And so I tend to like these. I've used some other ones that are similar from Balance Body, just the Balance Body 4-inch soft ball. They're green and a little textured, and I like that texture. Texture is important when we're doing like self-massage stuff, and can be helpful again to grab the skin. Balance Body is a Pilates company. For those of you who might not know, their website is pilates.com, so I can link all of those. But those are my favorite tools for doing any self-massage or exploration of our soft parts. We use soft balls. So I always say meet your soft parts with soft tools. Okay. A great resource for you if you do want to navigate the world of visceral massage or massaging of your abdomen and abdominal fascial parts in your rib cage, your pelvic areas, all of those sweet spots. My favorite resource now that it's out is Jill Miller's book, Body by Breath. It is wonderful and a great resource about how to use these balls, how to use your breath, and how it relates to your insides and your experience in your body. So it's a great resource. A lot of for me, one of the things I love about it is it gave me a resource to match with visceral work. When I was doing visceral with my patients, I was able to get a little bit more specific for them using the quarters ball to do self-visceral massage as well. So it's been a really great resource for self-care, pairing with my hands-on work with my clients. So speaking of the hands-on work, I'm actually going to, bear with me, I'm going to actually read the explanation from the Barral Institute on what visceral manipulation is, because I think they do a really great job of explaining it, and why fumble around when they've got the perfect words, right? So their general description is visceral manipulation is gentle manual therapy that assesses the structural relationships between the viscera and their fascial or ligamentous attachments to the various systems in the body. It assists functional and structural imbalances throughout the body, including musculoskeletal, vascular, nervous, urogenital, respiratory, digestive, eliminatory, neuroendocrine, and lymphatic dysfunction. It also has a blurb about what's going on, and I appreciated it because and they say this a lot in the classes, which I really appreciate. Let me find it here. Is the purpose of visceral manipulation is to recreate, harmonize, and increase proprioceptive communication in the body to enhance its internal mechanism for better health, thereby revitalizing a person and relieving symptoms of pain, dysfunction, and poor posture. So, I'll link this website in the show notes too. It's just the General Barral Institute website, so you can kind of read about the therapeutic value of visceral manipulation. But one of the things is, and this goes for muscle tissue as well as visceral and fascial tissue, there's, sometimes it gets lost in translation. People are like, we're releasing things, there's adhesions, and we're like breaking through scar tissue and things like that. That's not actually what happens. What you're doing is, with our hands as providers, especially providers trained in this, we've trained our hands to feel different qualities of things. So the best way I can explain this is you do this, you just don't think about it in terms of beneath our skin. But if I had an apple and an orange that were similar size to each other, and I put them on the table, and I laid a towel over the top of them, and I asked you to feel over that towel and tell me which one was the orange versus which one was the apple, I 100% believe that you could figure that out. So how did you figure it out? You figured it out because you knew from your knowledge of the anatomy of an orange and anatomy of an apple that they have very different qualities of feeling to them. The towel has the same quality. It's uniform over the orange and the apple. But beneath that towel, the orange has a different feeling of its skin than the apple. The apple is smooth and the skin isn't very thick, and you actually feel that in your hands, right? Because we have receptors. When our hands and our fingers are one of the richest areas in our body of receptors. And so we pick up on those qualities in our hands with the different mechanoreceptors in our hands. Each mechanoreceptor receives a different information. Some mechanoreceptors feel pressure. Some feel movement, some feel heat or temperature, right? So they all get picked up in here, and based on your prior knowledge of the anatomy of an apple and an orange, you're like, oh, that's the apple. Whereas when you put your hand on the orange, you felt that the skin of it was a little thicker and it was kind of rough. Feels very different to your hand. This is the same thing when practitioners like myself have been trained in visceral and neural manipulation and vascular manipulation. We have practiced and trained ourselves to pay attention to these qualities in our hand, and we know the anatomy really well. So when we have our hand in a certain area, we know that there's only certain things that it can be, and each one of those things in our guts has a very distinct quality of feel to it, right? So you know you're on a tube when it feels a certain way. You know you're on an artery versus a vein because they are very different feeling tubes. They're both tubes, but one's super collapsible and one is very firm, all right? But you know you're even in an area that could have an artery or a vein because you've studied the anatomy, right? So what we're doing with visceral manipulation is we're paying attention to where our hand is drawn and figuring out what structure that is. And what I mean by drawn is we're attracted to the area by tension surrounding the area, because oftentimes when there is scar tissue or when there is an organ that is not moving well, everything around it kind of goes and hugs it. And so we get pulled into that hug. And once we're in there, we test the mobility of the tissues. We just feel the quality of the tissue, just like you would on a muscle. We can feel when a muscle is like hardened or indurated, right? More hard. You can feel that in the visceral tissues as well. And then we do a mechanical something to it. That mechanical something to it is using our hands as the tools to speak directly to the mechanoreceptors within that tissue, right? So when we're speaking to the mechanoreceptors in that tissue, we're speaking in the language of movement and pressure, temperature, just like the rest of our receptors in our hands. We're speaking to the receptors in our guts. And we're improving the sensory information. We're improving the proprioceptive information in and around that structure, which is going to have an effect on the brain and then an output to the area. So it's going to change the movement. It's going to change the space. It may change the fluid flow. And then also there's this fascial piece that with the fascial piece, when we are shearing and manipulating the tissues slowly and gently, we're facilitating an increase of the shear facilitates an increase of hyaluronin, and the hyaluronin is hydrophilic and draws fluid into the tissues, and the tissues can become more hydrated, which is what we want, because hydrated tissues tend to move easier, and movement creates more space, and more space means happier organs and happier joints and happier tissues, right? So that's the same thing too when we're doing muscle work or skin work. The fascial framework, the fascial, I don't want to say web or like matrix. The fascial matrix has 250 million sensory nerve endings in it. The skin has 200 million sensory nerves in it. When we are manipulating the fascia, and I don't mean manipulate, I mean like when we're in there, when we're interacting with it, with whether it be our hands or movement or a soft ball like the Cortis ball or Franklin ball, we are speaking, we're engaged in a conversation between that tissue and the brain. And then we're going to change the output. In outputs, right? Outputs are movement and pain. Outputs are movement and pain and emotion, right? But that's what we're doing, right? Are we releasing things? Yes and no, because sometimes things are tight because they don't have very good information. So when we improve the information, they're no longer tight. But we're not releasing in the sense that there's a knot or there's a trigger point that we need to like beat the shit out of to make it let go, right? It's a more intelligent conversation. Are we changing the fascia in terms of hydration? Absolutely. Is our abdominal organs kind of all within these serous membranes, which are very hydrophilic? Yes. Does inflammation and scarring after surgery or injury decrease the hydration of the tissues? Yes. Is scar tissue a less hydrated form of tissue? Yes. So when we're in there and doing the work, we're improving this, right? We're improving the hydration of the tissue, and we're speaking to the mechanoreceptors of the tissue, whether that tissue is visceral or fascial or muscle, and we're getting a response from the brain and the nervous system. That's it, right? And when you can actually appreciate that scenario, you start to actually think, yeah, why would I need to go deeper or harder or use a hard tool? When all it is about a conversation or an exploration of our insides. So, hopefully that gives you a good argument of why not to use hard tools in your abdomen. One of the things I said in the reel was, you might read this and see that I said immediately no, and your response might be, well, I've used hard tools like this for a while and I'm fine and they help me. You know what? You do you. If you still want to do it after knowing that there is a risk of perforating or lacerating visceral tissue, then that is your choice to make. Your body, your choice. That is, I believe that for everyone. Your body, your choice. But I just want to make sure that it is an informed choice, not a choice based on marketing from a company who's trying to sell their product to you and make money, right? So, if you use a hard tool in your abdomen tomorrow, are you going to lacerate or perforate tissue? Probably not, but you could. For me, knowing the importance of organs, I'm not going to chance it, because there's way more things that I can do to make my back feel better or make my hips feel better than using hard tools in my abdomen and risking a life-threatening injury to my visceral organs. But like I said, you do you make your decision based on the knowledge that you have. That is always going to be my default. A total autonomy over your own body, but with informed decision making. So that's it for today. I hope that's helpful. Go buy Jill's book or borrow it from a friend, or just go to their internet, go to her Instagram. I'll link it in the bio. Check out the Barral Institute. Find a practitioner in your area. Make sure that they've taken at least VM 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are the first 4 classes of the visceral manipulation curriculum, and experience what it feels like to have gentle, intelligent, like very specific treatment, and meet your insides and see how it affects your outsides. Have a great day. See you next week.